feel, you could sense in your body, once you get the spins going, how much is enough. Like, okay, that's enough of a vibration. You get to feel a vibration in your body. As far as the speed, once they felt enough electrical, they'd very slowly stop. They wouldn't just stop the spin, because then you'd fall down and you'd break the whole field temporarily, and it just goes back to what it was before you tried to accelerate it. But they would slow it down, slow the spin down, till they came to a stop. And then they would stop and run some more of the Maharata current down through to stabilize that field. Then they'd slowly start going counterclockwise. They'd start to spin counterclockwise to get the bottom magnetic Merkaba spinning. And that would start to get that one going. It's like giving it kind of a kick, and then it will start to spin in the ratio that you set with the top one. They would use this process to tremendously accelerate the energies that they had run through the grid with the rainbow ray and the Maharata. And if they would do it together, they would literally create a large group Merkaba at the site that they were working. Now, these signet councils, and signet refers to Stargate, but instead of saying Stargate, they say signet, because signet points go in pairs. There's a Stargate point, and then in a different location, there's a Stargate activation point. So the signet is used to refer, when you say signet sites, it can be one or the other. It's both of them. You know, the activation site, which is called a Q site, or the just basic signet site, which is where the Stargate opens. They were fully aware when they ran the round tables. They were the tables of the rounds. They knew they were part of a round, that those 4 evolutionary rounds that we talked about. They knew that in their place, they were doing, in their time frame, they were doing their round, and they were counting on the fact that in the other race rounds, there would be the security councils doing the signet round tables in their rounds. So it was like a trans-time cooperative venture when they would run them. When we begin to run them now in our time frame, it's the same thing. In our line of history, what has happened is we ended up getting in trouble every time a stellar activation cycle happened. The grids crashed every time because something invaded and made it so we couldn't make the trans-time link the right way. It put us in a time continuum, or a larger cycle of forward movement that had sets of negative events that went with every stellar activation cycle. We're still in that continuum. What guardian races are trying to help us do now is make a shift into a different time continuum where those things went right. There are other time cycles of versions of this history in this earth that went in the positive vein, and they stayed in what's called the heroic probability, which is the one where they stayed in line, where the whole system, the earth system, stayed in line with its Christos purpose. It stayed in line. The grids didn't get damaged. We can tap into that. We can make a splice from this time continuum into that time continuum. The mechanics are really sophisticated. We don't have to understand all of that. We can understand our part in it, how we can help. It's called the Bridge Zone Project. Bridge Zone, because they're making a bridge of frequency between this time continuum and the one where things went right. If we can make the bridge zone frequency strong enough, we can make a time continuum shift, which will literally move us out of the vector, the time vector, the forward movement that we're going into a more positive outcome. The Guardians described it to me as the difference between the destiny of joy and the destiny of sorrow. Because if we stay in our current time vector, what would have happened if there was no intervention is we would have gone through pole shift at this period. The fallen angelics would have come in and take over. And in the year 2976 AD, because of what the fallen angelics would have done, it would have blown up the planet. So the whole thing would have been over. Not just the human race here, but the whole planet would have been destroyed. Because of that, and because of the fact that if this planet was destroyed, it would take out a bunch of other things that it's connected to. It would take out part of the Pleiades system, part of the Sirius system, and because there would be so many life fields affected, that even if humans made poor choices this time around, because basically Guardians will intervene if we ask them to, and if we're showing some respect for the fact that we exist in the universe, and this race as a whole is not doing a really great job of that. But there were enough people that came together during the harmonic convergence in the 80s that showed that there was enough people here that cared, that wanted to make a difference. Then it was discovered in 1983, the outcome that if intervention wasn't given, the fact that in 2976 the place would just blow up. That's when the Bridge Zone Project came to be. In 1983, it was decided by the founders in Density 5 and a bunch of the Guardian Councils all the way down that there would be direct intervention offered. They would have liked to have come in spaceships and introduced themselves, but there was a problem. Since 25,500 BC, the Nibiruans have had control of the solar spiral, which is gate 4, the one between the higher frequency levels, the higher density levels, and our 3D Earth system. You have to come through gate 4. And the basic proposition was, you try to go in Fleet Guardians, and we'll make the place roll now. So it was a standoff. We can still access, the Guardians can still access parts of the grids. They still control some of the vortices. But because the Nibiruans have control of gate 4, which comes down through Giza, they do have the power at the moment to throw the magnetic grids out of balance, where it would cause pole shift. So they basically, this is why the Guardians haven't come in at this point. In 1983, they would have made their presence known and try to explain things, to our political leaders. Good luck. They did make a few attempts to send emissaries in to talk to some of the people that are involved with the interior world government and try to explain to them what was happening and try to explain to them that the Zeta treaties that they entered in the 1930s were going to get them in really big trouble now. And they were basically told to take a hike. The Illuminati races were more interested in working with the fallen angelics that they're connected to than they were interested in peaceful means. It basically came down to, we'll agree with you Guardians if you give us bigger weapons. And I said, wait a minute, that's not how you fix things. You're not going to fix it by trying to blow the fallen angelics out of the sky. You're not going to fix it. It doesn't work that way. What will fix it are the round tables. It's if we do the round tables and we can build a critical mass of frequency in the Earth's grids, running the D12 Maharata current, resetting the fire letter sequences in the Earth's grids the way they're supposed to be, we can break the link that Nibiru has through the solar gate on the planet. We can stabilize the planetary Merkaba fields with gate 6, okay, and that's the 6-dimensional gate in Sirius B. We can hopefully prevent pole shift for Earth changes. That's what we're aiming for. In the ancient of days when they did this, they didn't have to worry too much about that. But they did have to worry about pole shift, because even then, even if nothing attacked or invaded when the angelics were trying to do their job running the round tables, if they didn't run the round tables, because of the damages in Earth's grids, the place would roll. It would go, the electromagnetic fields would collapse and the place would go into a pole shift. If the angelics weren't on the planet, it would go into pole shift. So the angelic races, the angelic human races, were put here to serve as a buffer blanket until they could fulfill the Christos realignment and get the grids corrected. What they had to do was during stellar activation cycles, when the 4th through higher stargates open, 4th through 12 open, they had to run the round tables, the Signet Councils, and the codes that were in their DNA templates, those flame codes in the tribal shield that go exactly with what the shields of the planet are supposed to be coded in. They had the corrected fire letter sequences in their DNA. They would run the frequencies of the Maharata and the Rainbow Ray that would take the imprint from their DNA template, from their tribal shield, into the planetary shields. As long as there was enough of them to do it to reach critical mass, it would flip over portions of the distorted grids, setting the fire letter sequences back. So they could sustain the frequencies. They would transduce the frequencies in a stellar activation cycle. As each gate opened, more frequencies from the interdimensional spectrum would come in. They'd run through the angelic human bodies, pick up the right coding, hit a critical mass, and flip it in the planetary grids. That was what we were here for. So even if we weren't messed with, we still had a job to do, that the place would still roll if we didn't do our job. This is why, for thousands of years, we've been being fed prophecies that when the end times come, the end times are coming in the year 2000, right around there. This is why. It was known. And what the plan was to make sure the angelic humans were totally dysfunctional by then, where they couldn't run the round tables, where they never even heard the word round table by then. It was the Atlantian conspiracy that I mentioned before was an intentional, strategic, long-term plan to make sure that by the time the 2000 to 2017 stellar activation cycle came, angelic humans would be totally dysfunctional and have no more of the knowledge left where they could do what needed to be done to stop the place from rolling, because they want the place to go in a pole shift to clear the real estate. It will get rid of the humans on the planet and everything else for a while. What they plan to do then was take the connection that they have already made with the Nibiruan grids, get Earth's planetary fire letter sequences running in reverse like Nibiru is, which would literally change its orbital pattern in space. It would run it in reverse. And then they can live on the planet. Because right now it's very difficult for them to sustain for any long periods. It biologically wears them down because they can't handle the amount of frequency that runs through the planetary grids when the fire letters are running in the appropriate manner. So what the fallen angelics need to do, if they want to come in personally and stay here, not just visit, they can visit, but they can't visit and stay permanently because it wears out their biologies, because reverse fire letter sequence DNA coding cannot process nearly as much frequency as DNA coding that has the proper fire letter sequences. So there has been a long-term plan to get Earth's grids running in reverse, get rid of the human populations, so the fallen angelics could come in directly. And what they wanted to do when they got here was use the place to go through into the inner Earth portals, where there's something very precious there. We have the halls of Amente stargates, for starters. But in the inner Earth, there are something called the crystal pylon temples. There are 12 temples of massive proportions. They were created. They're, let's say, angel-made instead of man-made, but angel-made technology that utilizes natural crystalline technology and the natural frequencies of stargates to create massive amounts of power. There are certain planets within the 4 densities that have had one of these setups put in. They're usually put in when there is damage to grids and they need to repair them. So they weren't put in just so people could have more power to play with. I believe they were put in, the stuff is in the book, it's some of the new stuff that's being given. I think it was at the end of Seeding 2, I think it was about 3 million years ago, when they established the crystal pylon temples in inner Earth. These temples have selenite crystal rods, which I don't know if anybody's seen selenite, which is kind of like, it's clearish like quartz, but it's more milky, and it's like in striated, like, what would you call them? Kind of like fiber optic cables, but solid. And they come in long, kind of like bars. It's not like little quartz terminated crystals. They're like long bars. These selenite crystals were brought in from Sirius B, where they organically occur. They have the ability to go through 3 harmonics. That means you could take them up into density 3, and they would hold their form. You can bring them down into density 1, and they hold their form. Some things will transmute and change into something else. They'll change its chemical compounds and its molecular structure if you take it through the densities. But the selenite rods from Sirius B have a large range of being able to go from density 1 to density 3 and still operate and function as what they are manifest as in density 2 where they come from. These crystals are as big as skyscrapers, like the Empire State Building. Imagine a crystal that big. I mean, these are like walk-in crystals, you know what I mean? And some of them literally, the ones that aren't being directly used as the generator systems, have been carved out, and there are cities within them. So these exist in inner Earth, and there are 12 primary ones placed right in where the stargates open. In inner Earth, they have kept their stargates open. They have had them open for thousands and thousands of years. They haven't had the problems that we have here. Ideally, if things were going good on this planet, we would not even have to get a setup of our own crystals because we're connected to inner Earth. We would simply be able to run our stargate system off them. We could keep our gates open all the time once the planet's under Maharic seal, and it's safe to do that. If we do that now, we've got to be crazy because everything would invade from all over the place. That's why this place is very valuable, because it's one of the few places in our time matrix that there is a crystal pylon set up. If a person or a group that's a fallen angelic group gets a hold of a planet and gets control of one of these setups, they can use it to progressively go after all of the other planetary systems and galaxies. It has so much power and the ability to interface with all of the Stargate systems and the smaller portal systems in this time matrix that they could progressively use it to reverse the fire letter coding all the way up to D11 in this time matrix, which is what they want to do. If this time matrix was reversed, had its fire letter sequences run in reverse up to D11, it would create a little system within a system. The Density 5 Brenau, the Founders Races, and the Janus Ascended Masters collectives from beyond the time matrix would not be able to come in directly anymore. They'd have to take on a reverse matrix, incarnation form, which would screw up their consciousness, so it's not worth trying to come in, because the biology would distort the consciousness anyway. This happened in this time matrix 250 billion years ago, when the fallen angelics destroyed Stargate 12. They destroyed it by reverse running the matrix of Stargate 11 in reverse and sending it back up into Gate 12, which made Gate 12 implode. They had control of this time matrix for several million years, and they were dominating everything they got their hands on. Worse than that, there were two groups of them. You had draconian ones that are out of the fallen seraphim, and you had the Anu ones, the Anu Elohim ones, that were out of the fallen Elohai. Elohai Elohim were the founders race, and one group of them got all messed up. They became the Anu Elohim. It was kind of interesting the way it went down, where the fallen seraphim draconian races that were originally of Vega in Lyra, in density 4, they started raiding certain areas and taking over planetary, like liquid light, we're talking liquid light dimensions here, planetary systems there, and started to work their way down the densities. This made the fallen Anu Elohim on a planet called Lyra Avion very nervous, and they petitioned the Elohai and the High Councils of the Brenau to destroy the draconian races because they were posing a threat. The draconians hadn't done anything so bad yet that it warranted destroying them, because the founders know you can't destroy something. You have to heal it one way or the other. I mean, if you destroy it, you just turn it back to space dust, and it has to re-evolve back through a form again anyway, because we're all connected, we're all in God, we're all part of God. You can't make it go anyplace else. You can't send it off into a criminal camp in some other cosmos, because there isn't another cosmos. It's all taken place within God. So the answer to their request of will you destroy this race was no, but we will help to rehabilitate it. The Anu Elohim, being just as messed up as the Draconians were, didn't like the answer. They decided that they knew better, and they decided to get rid of council who would stop them from trying to destroy the Draconian races. So they figured out a way to back-run the frequencies from Gate 11, which was in Lyra Avion. These were the 3' gate planets. You had Vega in D10 that had Gate 10. You had Avion in D11 that had Gate 11. And you had Aramatena, which was the one Earth is connected to, in D12. And that was a 12th dimensional gate. And they're all in Lyra. They were Lyra planets. Now, because the Anu Elohim didn't like the response of, no, we're not going to destroy the Draconian races, they decided they'd take matters into their own hands. They reversed the fire letters enough in Gate 11 to back run them up into Gate 12, and it imploded the morphogenetic structure, or the core template of Gate 12, which made it inoperable. That sealed everything into this time matrix until that gate could be fixed. Nothing was going to ascend back out. They could get up to Gate 11, but they couldn't get any further. Then the Anu Elohim decided they were going to wage a campaign. Now it was their time matrix. Now they didn't have the interference of the Density 5 Brenau orders and the Janus Ascended Masters. Now they didn't have to deal with God, basically. They could be their own gods. And they set out a genocide campaign against the Draconian races. They were going to destroy them. If we wouldn't, they would. They were very much oriented to race supremacy, and they felt they were the most important race in the universe. And they were going to get rid of everything that wasn't them, including any other life forms that they didn't seed. And then they were going to seed it with only their own. That was their objective here. Now, if that were allowed to have happened, well, we wouldn't have the Draconian problem, that's for sure. They'd be gone by now. We wouldn't be here either. But it would have progressively, over many millions, maybe billions of years, they would have finally ended up destroying each other and the time matrix itself. And that causes other problems for other time matrices that are energetically connected to this one. So Gate 12 was repaired over numerous million years of guardians working in the higher fields to do it. That event was called the original sin. It was known as the original sin. That's where that concept came from, the biblical concept. It wasn't something that humans did to get kicked out of the Garden of Eden. It was something the Anu Elohim did to try to spitefully get even with council because they didn't get their own way when they wanted to run race supremacy through this time matrix. The original sin was called a sin Not because sin, in the way it's usually used, is something even real. Sin can be understood as working or doing something in a way that erodes the life potential, the perpetual life potential. Now, the natural condition of the universe and of what God has created is to have perpetual life. We're supposed to be able to come into density, experience manifestation, have all sorts of neat experiences in the hologram, and then work our way back out. It's not supposed to be hard. And then when we get back out, we can hang out in non-manifestation for a while and at one-ment with Source, and then we can come back in and play some more. It was supposed to be a playground. Some playground. It's like war games, you know. So the original intention was to simply have a place to explore and develop and just explore creation in density. Now, the original sin was a sin because it worked in reverse. The actions worked in reverse of sustaining that original intention. If the original intention is to have perpetual energy and consciousness moving in and out, circulating like a living circulatory system, anything that blocks that ability would be considered a sin, or something that takes the word live, L-I-V-E, and puts it in reverse. You get evil, right? Okay. The original sin was the destruction of Gate 12, because what it did was it wiped out the 12th dimensional coding in anything's DNA template. Founders races that were lower than D12 that had manifested in deeper into the densities were stuck here, because when Gate 12 is destroyed, the 12th strand imprint in anything's DNA will dismantle itself. It will turn into junk DNA, just like lots of our other strands have. This can happen on a planetary level, but it can also happen on a time matrix level, and that's what happened. Everything was trapped in here, including a lot of ascended masters that had come in to do different types of jobs. So there was a major effort made to restore Gate 12, and it was done, and this was still before humans were even created. The Azarites, which were a guardian race that was created at that time, they were created 250 billion years ago, I believe that was when they were created, to serve as the patrol team, basically, to make sure this didn't happen anymore to the Stargates, because it can literally decimate this system and others if it's allowed to happen. So we have a very long history that's led up to this point in time. And time is simultaneous, so it's really a history that's going on up there, right as we speak. And it's really, if time is simultaneous, it's not so much that something went that we can't change behind us. What we need to do is orient ourselves with the right set of energy networks that connect us to the past and the future, that are the ones we want to experience. When we connect with the future we want to experience energetically and start moving into that time continuum, it will shift the coding that's in the grids that goes with the past. It will erode the distortions and put them back to their original thing. So it's like literally erasing the past and putting them back right. We'll still have the memory of the fact that it didn't go right, but we'll also have the memory of the adjustment. So it doesn't negate the fact that the past happened. It upgrades it. That's what we're aiming for on a planetary level here. So there's a lot of pieces to cover. And a lot of this comes right back into what we call our known history. Our known history, since the time of the Atlantian flood, which occurred in 9558 BC, has basically been motivated by one thing: the quest for the Ark of the Covenant, and it wasn't the portal passage exactly that they were questing for. They were questing for a box, a big gold box that was the original one. The real one is gold and it's lined with lead. It was lined with lead and a few other substances to protect radiation from leaking out, because there were tools placed in there. After the Atlantian flood, 9558 BC, the humans that were put back on Earth couldn't access the inner Earth portals directly. They were on security seal. So the guardian races were given two tools that came to be known as the rod and the staff. They were small tools. The staff was about 3 inches long, and they were charged with frequency from the Ark of the Covenant portal passage, so they could transmit rainbow ray frequency, even if a human body at the time couldn't. If you had one of those, you could transmit portions of the Kira primal light fields. Primarily, they were coded to D5 coding. All right, so they weren't all powerful, but these tools were powerful enough to use destructively, that you could use them to get control of Earth's stargates. They were given not for that purpose. They were given to allow the guardian races that were here, the Magi Grail lines, to have open access to the inner Earth portals, where they could use the rod and the staff to open them when they wanted to, because they were invited, they were welcome into the inner Earth crystal pylon temples, and they used to work a lot with them. The rod and the staff were given so they would have the ability, and they were under high protection. They were always highly protected. They were given so we'd have the ability to open the portals to inner Earth so we could keep the relationships going with the inner Earth civilizations. Well, once it got out that that box existed, we had a race for the box, and everybody was trying to steal it. And most of our history, including the known history as far as invasions, what country invaded what country, most of it was due to either trying to get the box itself, or at times, one of the things wouldn't be in the box, it would be someplace else. There was also a set of key codes that at a certain point there were security seals put on the box. So you had to have the light, symbol, sound programs that would open them, or you would basically get fried if you tried to lift the lid. Right? There were tablets that contained these, and there were several different, some were on papyrus a long time ago, but there were others that were in stone. They were the commands that would open the box. There were 10 given out of the 12, and the 2 would have to be given by the higher races. We get into the story of the 10 commandments. There's a lot more to those commandments than they ever told us. The original 10 commandments were the security release tones. They were the combinations of light, symbol, sound tones to be used in sequence to open the seals on the Ark of the Covenant box so you could get in there to get the tools out. Now, there's a lot more. I won't go too much into the 10 Commandments story now because it's part of a much longer history that I'll get more into this afternoon. But that gets into Moses and Abraham and a bunch of other famous characters that we know very well from the biblical teachings. The important thing about understanding this whole thing, I chuckle sometimes when I think about it because it's like, of course, once you see it, that's how it affected me. When I saw the history has unfolded and what the purposes were, it was like, oh God, of course, that's what it's been all about. But until that point, you have no idea. It doesn't look like anything's connected with anything. It's all been about a quest for who's going to get control of these gates in the 2017 stellar activation cycle. And it wasn't the first time that quest was. Before the Ark of the Covenant box was ever made, because that was relatively recent. That was made in 540 BC, after the flood of 9558 BC. Yeah. It was, so it wasn't the quest for the Ark itself that had been the main motivator of history before that. It was the Grail quest that was before that. And the quest for the Ark is part of the Grail quest. Because the Grail, the Holy Grail of the planet, is the Templar system. It's the system of stargates that allow the perpetual life force frequencies to run through. It's the cup. This is the symbolism that has come down. The Holy Grail wasn't the cup that Christ drank out of. Well, it was, in a way, but it wasn't a cup that you hold in your hand. It wasn't a manufactured cup. It was the Holy Grail of the body that the perpetual life force currents ran through. And we all have one. It's the internal Holy Grail. There has been a quest for literally millions of years since the first seeding. The fallen angelics have been questing to get control of Earth's Templar in order to use it to get control of the crystal pylon temples and the halls of Amente stargates so they could use them to get control of this time matrix. It's a big drama we're a part of. Now, in the present cycle that we're in, which is like, they call it the final conflict battle. Sounds like something you'd find on sci-fi, First wave and final conflict, that kind of thing. We are in the middle of what was intended to be, since the Atlantian period, the final conflict. And the fallen angelics were quite confident that they were going to come in here and simply take over. They'd use us in the process, whoever they could get. This is where the New Age movement fits in. Lots of people are talking to things up there that they can't see nowadays, because things out there are talking to them. There is a huge movement, and it was part of the Atlantean conspiracy, to, right before it was time for the stellar activation, there would be certain chosen ones selected same ones that were in the other time vectors that they messed with and selected, to bring through information that would motivate groups of people to do energy work with reverse matrix coding. But of course the people wouldn't know it. They wouldn't know that they were running reverse fire letter sequences because they wouldn't be taught about fire letter sequences. They wouldn't be taught the technical stuff that goes with this. They would simply be taught to, if you love God and you want your spirituality, here, activate this, here, open that, right? Here's how you do planetary grid work. This is what's going on in the New Age movement. It's about, at this point, about 90% fallen angelic communication. And that's really sad, because at certain points, our guys were trying to communicate to that way. But at this point, they can't even encourage people to develop channeling skills unless they'll do it with the Maharic seal. Because you start channeling, you're going to get everybody and their brother up there. They're going to be standing in line. Oh, a body, right? They're interested in infiltrating our biofields to motivate us to run reverse matrix codes into the planetary grids. Because if we do this, we're helping them fulfill their agenda. If they can get enough of reverse matrix coding in the planetary grids, they will not only be able to create pole shift, which they'll do on their own without us doing that, but it will be easy for them to come in. What they're planning to do is they will create pole shift. They've already prepared the grids through the New Age movement, having reverse matrix codes run. After the dust settles after pole shift, then they'll bring in their chosen ones that they evac out, the little groups. And there's these little groups. Galactic Federation's running a really nice evacuation program, last time I heard. These people are going to take certain humans off the planet, make sure they have the reverse matrix coding in their DNA, and then they're going to put them back on to run the rest of the grids in reverse until it hits critical mass, and then they're going to get wiped out. The people they put back on to resettle, they know that. They're expendable. They're going to put them back on to get the grids running full in reverse. It'll again cause pole shift, which will change the orbital alignment, and it'll put it in alignment with Nibiru. Then the humans are gone again, even the chosen ones. They're expendable. This is what chosen one people don't realize. They're being used. If you're dealing with guardian groups, everybody's chosen, okay? Everybody's welcome as part of the cosmic family. So these chosen ones groups that are being set up to run reverse matrix coding into the grids. They are then expendable, where by doing so, they will put the place into a reverse pole spin to finalize it. Literally, the orbital alignment of the planet will change, and this will take a number of years. They'll put the resettlement communities back on. If it takes 200 years to recode those full grids into reverse, they'll stay there that long. Then it will create the pole shift. They'll let the humans they put back on die, because they don't want them. What they want is the planet for themselves and the races they have created. There are races that are part them, that are with us now, that are part human. And some of them have incarnations out of those matrices, like they're not even human souls in them anymore. But these people are being used too, is what they don't realize. These are the Illuminati races. They don't realize that, yeah, you might get to be on the evac team, and they're going to have you as a resettlement team after they get, the rest of the humans off the planet. But you're only there for a purpose, to get critical mass saturation or the reversal on the grids, and then you're going to be left sitting there when the place rolls. So then they can come in and take it and go from there to try to get the crystal pylon temples of inner earth. This is the whole drama that's going on, and we're sitting right in the middle of it. So there's a lot to learn to get to the point where your mind goes, oh my God, there is a problem, isn't there? Because one of the greatest things in the New Age movement, that is one of the things that makes me want to bite. I mean, if I were going to get aggravated, it's hard to really get me aggravated, but something that I just want to scream when people throw it at me is, we don't have to worry about any of that. Oh, you're in polarity consciousness because you think there's bad things out there. It's all perfect. We're in Christ consciousness. And this is how it's like this space cadet attitude that, meanwhile, you look in their eyes and they're focused over here someplace. There's this real terrified of anything negative. Well, Christ conscious beings don't think about negative things. They just know they have the power to create positive. I pretend it's not there, therefore it isn't. Christ consciousness doesn't work that way. They're being taught to think it does work that way. Why? Because if they don't think there's a problem, they're not going to do anything to solve it. Because they're going to reject the teachings that are brought in to how to solve that problem. This is one of the things I've run into in the past 2 years since I started bringing this material out. I have been hit with it all over the place. And you know what's so funny? These wonderfully Christ-conscious beings that have 12 strands or maybe 14 of DNA activated can be the nastiest people when they get aggravated. Oh, they curse at you and call you names. And, I mean, my gracious, this is a spiritual Christ-conscious activated being. Yeah, right? It's like, look at the product, look at yourself. You're calling yourself, this is like testimony here. What did you just say? There is a nastiness that some of these people can throw. They'll be sweet to your face as long as everything's going the way they want it to. But as soon as you say something that confronts their very fragile little belief system, they get very nasty. That shift where they can get very nasty can indicate two things. One, a human that's so attached to it having to be safe because they're terrified if it's not, that they get nasty. Or, more likely, it isn't even a human reacting that way. They have field infiltration because they've opened their hearts without thinking about putting up their Moharic seal, and they have company, and they're the ones that get nasty. I have seen people shift, look me in the eye, they seem like normal people, say something that confronts that light, love, and clueless thing that we call it, and this nastiness comes through. And just like with a real mean, I hate you feel. Like just the energy shifts where you know that they just love to zap you. If they had the rod or the staff, they'd use it to make you disappear painfully, hopefully. This isn't even the human aspect of them. This is when you start to get to see what the consciousness of a Drac or an Anunnaki fallen angelic looks like. All right? So the humans are being played on in the New Age movement. And the funny thing is everybody thinks the New Age movement was started to be a good thing. It started, the new consciousness coming in, all this wonderful fluff that they teach us. It was actually, now our guys got involved to try to turn it into a good thing, but it was originally part of the Atlantian conspiracy. It was known that they would start a movement of contact when it got near the time for the stellar activation cycle, so they could get their legions lined up here, and they could get control of human bodies who had enough of the codes that they could reverse the matrix on their DNA template. They had the fire codes that went with the Earth's templates. You take a human body, you infiltrate its field, get into its DNA template. There's something called monadic reversal. Okay? The monad is basically your D8 core. It's like one of the cores of the DNA template. Monadic reversal. If you can get to that core of the template, if you can get to strand 12, which they can't get to because that's protected with the Christos frequency, D8's the next level to get it at. If they go for the 8th strand, if they can get it running fully in reverse, and then a couple other strands, get the 5 letters running in reverse, it will flip over the whole matrix, and you'll have your DNA running in reverse, 5 letter codes. What it does to you as a person is totally mess up everything, because you will have to go through all sorts of incarnational cycles or stay on planet until you can undo that, unless you get bioregenesis to fix it. But once it's done, it's extremely difficult. It will kill the body to put it back. So you would have to incarnate to begin working on solving the problem if you had full monadic reversal. What they're doing with people, a lot of the healing modalities, that are coming out these days, even some of the good ones that used to be good healing modalities, they're using them to transmit the frequencies through people. If you take a healer who didn't know how to protect their fields, and they don't know, they can't see beyond D4, a lot of them, most people that are working with healing that see things are seeing through the D4 spectrum. You can get them from D6. You can't even, they won't even be able to tell that something is in their field messing with them. You start to transmit. You give them that monadic reversal by progressively transmitting the opposite frequencies that belong in their DNA templates, and it'll put their strands into reversal. When they do healing work, they're transmitting that to the people they're healing. They don't know it. They wouldn't ever do it if they knew. There has been progressive saturation here with the attempt of putting people into monadic reversal. Because there's two very useful things you can do once you monadically reverse a human being. A, you've got control now of the codes that match the planetary grids, which an Anunnaki alone can't access. A Drac alone can't access. They need human beings because we have the codes that correspond to the grids. Put it in monadic reversal, now you have the opposite codes. So you can access the grids through the co-resonance of the having the same pattern and then its opposite, and then just run it in reverse. This is why they have been infiltrating. This is why they did the New Age movement. It was to get everybody to channel and not even ask for a resume as far as who you were talking to. These days, this is why I call it, I don't mean to insult people, but I call it the light, love, and clueless movement. because they don't want to know who it might be they're talking to, because they're just so happy they're talking to somebody, you know? And hey, we've been down here alone for a long time with the psychic abilities shut off. We've been lonesome, a lonesome race that's being played on. All right? So if something comes in and says, I am Archangel Joe, you know, I'm wonderful and I love you dearly. We've you know, always served your race and we're here to help you now. And they're really sweet about it. Most humans are like, wow, I'm talking to angels. And all of a sudden the whole life changes, of course. They're going to be angel channels, you know? Once you've got that connection, you don't ever want to lose it. They're playing on the fact that we've been lonesome here. They're playing on the fact that we do have the ability to channel our higher selves and other things, good things, if we know how to channel safely, if we know how to seal our biofields. Channeling itself is a natural attribute of human consciousness. However, if you do it without your field sealed with the D12 frequency, you're asking, you're wearing a sign on your astral body saying, take me, vacant. Because right now, bodies are primo real estate. You want to take over this planet, you're the density 2 body, you can project part of yourself into this body and get it to run around and do what you want with it. If it serves their purposes, they will let the personality who's in there stay. And they will simply point them. They'll guide them. They'll be their voice of spiritual wisdom. And they'll tell them where to go and what to run, as far as the frequencies. If the body's real valuable, and they just want to get the person out of the way, or if the person is a little too shrewd, start saying, wait a minute, I don't know if I want to do that. You know, you're telling me to go over and do that, and that's not a nice thing to do to that person, and maybe I don't want to do that. When the questions start happening, that's when, okay, personality's getting in the way, then they'll go for body snatch, which means they will force a critical mass of their energy into the body template, into the DNA template, and force out the original soul that inhabited it. That's called possession. Okay? If they don't do monadic reversal on the DNA code, they can't do possession. So they usually build up with subtle contact first. Then they will go into field infiltration, coming into the astral field and the closer fields. Then they'll move in to the small parts of the strands that hold miasms, because miasms are reversed matrix antiparticles in the particle field. It's a reversal pattern. They can attach to the miasms, and from there they try to contaminate and expand the miasms and work out into the point where they got control of strands. Once they get control of enough strands, they can literally force out the person who was born into that body. And that is happening at an alarming rate right now. It used to happen in ancient Egypt. It's kind of funny. Psychology says, oh, that stuff's not real, that doesn't exist. Boy, they don't remember the ancient Egyptian times, obviously. Because in ancient Egypt, there was so much problems because there were different vortices and things open. The D2, the elemental vortice, which goes into the second dimensional frequencies, that was frequently opened in the ancient Egyptian times. And all sorts of creatures and things would come out there. They'd be two-dimensional, where they'd be ghost images, but usually dark shadow ghost images. And they had shape. I mean, some of them were draconian-looking, some of them were people-looking. But they were very negative, and they had very convoluted, twisted consciousness. They would attach to people's fields all over the place. And they would get in the bodies all over the place. So if a person came into a mystical school, preschool was like taking a shower. Okay, call out the ones who know how to bounce the things out. So we do boogie bouncing, you know. You would run the frequencies through the field, get the field up high enough where they can't stand high frequency, the ones from D2. So you'd learn to clear the fields of persons by they couldn't hold a higher frequency themselves because the thing was repressing their own DNA template activation. But a person whose fields were cleared and sealed at least to the higher levels. You couldn't even seal it to D12 back in ancient Egypt because the Mahabharata current wasn't running in the grids. But you could at least seal it to about D11 and just watch it real close. So the priests, or what they would call the priests, they would be the ones that made sure their field integrity was there. And they would go in and they would do these psychic battles with them. And sometimes the people would live and sometimes the people wouldn't. It depended on how far into the template the things got. You know, the boogies, as we call them, you know. So these things that were a part of our ancient history are a part of our reality right now, but our psychology and our sciences have convinced us to, oh, you know, that's the old wives' tale stuff. Nobody believes that. Hey, if we don't believe it, we're not going to worry about it, are we? It's just going to happen. Guess who's helping the scientists with that one? There's a whole picture that's going on. That the solution to the whole picture is simply angelic humans doing what they came to do in the first place, fulfilling the divine commission, which was doing the planetary Christos realignment mission. which is done by running the round tables. It's that easy. You don't need to call out the big guns and have space battles and all that kind of stuff to change this. If we can get enough people together to run the frequencies, and the procedures are not that hard. It's not hard to run a rainbow round table. The hardest thing is realizing you have a tribal shield and activating it. We ran through that yesterday, and that was not a hard procedure. Simply knowing the parts and how to use the mind to activate them. If we can get enough people in enough locations running the rainbow rounds, we will be able to undo a lot of the damage they've already done. Now, we couldn't do this just alone. There's a couple things that have to be fixed, or even that won't work. One of them goes back to a period in history that I've mentioned a few times before, 25,500 BC. In 25,500 BC, a thing began. The thing was called the Lucifer Rebellion. Thank you. The Lucifer Rebellion was an event that began on Nibiru, which is that planet that dips into density 1 and then goes back into density 2 orbital cycles. That's the home of the Anunnaki, one of the homes of them. The Anunnaki come from, actually I'm not going to use this yet. I'm going to talk for a bit more. We'll get to those in a little while. I'm going to sit for a second. Does it bother anybody if I sit on this chair? It's a little higher. So I don't think I'll be invisible to you guys back there. But the Lucifer Rebellion is key to understanding what's taken place here. The word Lucifer came out of, I think I described this yesterday. It's an Anunnaki family name. It's a combining of two different groups of Anunnaki. One was the Marduk-Satane family of Anunnaki, and the other was the Thoth-Enki Lulatan family. They became what's known as the Luciferians. All right, and there were other races created from them. Well, in 25,500 BC, the Marduk family of the Anunnaki took control of Nibiru. Before, Nibiru had been in control of by certain groups of Anunnaki, the Thoth-Enki ones particularly, that had been working the Emerald Covenant. The Emerald Covenant is the peace treaty. It's a coevolution treaty for this time matrix that says everybody will be nice to each other and will co-evolve here. It's the Founders Treaty. When the Marduk family got control of Nibiru from the then peaceful Thoth-Enki family, they began a campaign of dominion, spreading it through different systems. And one of the main systems they've always been after has been Earth. There was a thing that went down during the period just after 25,500 BC. Now, in 25,500 BC, this was a key time. It wasn't a stellar activation cycle time, but it was a little bit before there was going to be one. 22,326 BC was the next due stellar activation cycle. So they were aiming for having control of the planetary grids by the time the 22,326 BC stellar activation cycle happened, because they can only fully reverse the matrix on the planet during a stellar activation cycle. That's the only time they could possibly run critical mass fire letter reversal to create the orbital reversal that they're looking for. So their conquest began in 25,500 BC when they got full control of the Nibiruan grids. They created a system that is run partially by outer technologies rather than just energy running. There's a physical technologies that go with some of this. There are apparatus on Nibiru that are part of a crystal network. And again, they know how to use selenite rods and things like that too. There's a type of technology called photoradionic technology that utilizes selenite rods, and it's a type of photonic conversion energy that has to do with energy vibration ratios. It's a pretty complicated thing to try to explain as far as in terms of physics goes, and I wouldn't do it justice yet. By the time the book is done, we probably will have at least a decent explanation. But the photoradionic technologies that utilize large types of crystal, sometimes rock, it depends on what you're trying to do, they have capacity to do tremendous good and also tremendous harm. On Nibiru, they set up, 25,500 BC, they set up a system of crystal complexes. They're not the same type as the crystal pylon temples that run, the planetary temple are here. They're they're set up in a little bit different way. They're not right in the stargates, but it's basically the same type of technology. But it was to be used for negative purposes. It was to be used for dominion purposes. So they set up the grid, a crystal grid, on Nibiru. Then they used that grid to create a reversal in part of their Merkaba spiral that connects into the solar spiral, the D4 solar gate. Now Earth's connected to the D4 solar gate as well. They were able to run, because there was enough frequency on the planet at the time, enough reversed fire letters in the damaged grids, that they could progressively link that frequency from Nibiru through the solar gate and down into Earth's grids. By anchoring that system, they actually managed to create a tilt, not a pole shift, but just a minor tilt in the natural Merkaba axis of the planet, where they literally, if you looked at, I don't have a diagram of this, but I would have liked to, but we didn't get there yet. If you look at the sun as being here, and Earth as being here, and there's a Merkaba field coming from Earth with its little point connecting to the sun, and then you have Nibiru over here with its own little Merkaba field connecting to the sun. What they were able to do with this crystal network was take that cone sitting on top of the Earth circle, the little Merkaba field, and move its axis just slightly to where it plugged into Nibiru. So literally, our solar currents run down through Nibiru. They pick up a reverse matrix from the Nibiruan grids. There was only one way they could do something like that, was to anchor enough of the reverse frequency here. They had to do it here, and they had to do it on parallel Earth, which is like the reflection system to ours, the antiparticle universe. So they put in 2 installments of crystal grids, a circle of 12 selenite rods, their own, that they had actually stolen from Sirius B, because Sirius B is the place where they get most of the selenite, crystal rods. They created a circle of crystal rods. Here, it was placed in the area we call Stonehenge now. Before there were stones there were crystals there. In 25,500 BC, there was an installment brought in. And it wasn't just brought in secretly. There were negotiations made with the Atlanteans. He said, look at all the advantages you can have. We have this technology that will really, really help you. You'll be able to have much more gate access power and all sorts of nice things. It was a technological advancement. It was a Trojan horse is what it was. The Atlanteans didn't even realize what hit them when they allowed this to be put in. They helped put it in. When they set up the system here, there was also teams that were setting up a counterpart system in parallel Earth. So the frequencies would actually run through parallel and through this Earth and back and forth. What it did was hold a reverse matrix code on the D1, 2, and 3 frequencies, or at least part of them. They weren't able to fully overload the grids, or we'd be in full reversal by now. But there was this setup put in. It was called the Nibiruan Diotic Crystal Grid that would run frequency from parallel Earth on a reverse matrix through and continually contaminate Earth's grids with reverse codings. And they had figured that by the 22,326 BC stellar activation cycle, that there would be enough code saturation by using this apparatus that that would be the final conflict. That would be the grand hurrah. Well, we ended up in a stalemate in 22,326 BC because they went in for the final kill. Our guys knew they were going to, and they seeded a race called the Iani, which are it's another branch of the Indigo children of the Magi King lines. But they were a group of they called them Iani, which means of the Ianis, which are the Ascendant Masters, because they were a team of them that carried like 48-strand DNA templates. They were the highest level of them. They were Ascendant Masters that came in to try to stop this from happening. What they were trying to do then was to disarm the Nibiruan Diotic Crystal Grid. So when the stellar activation cycle happened, they couldn't use it to put the place into full reversal. And it's really funny, because as time went on, that didn't happen then. There was something called the Iani Massacre that happened in 22,326 BC. And we were invaded because someone we had trusted for a very, very long time, a being that was out of the Toth Enki family of Anunnaki. Some of the Anunnaki had joined the Emerald Covenant in 246,000 BC on its restatement down here at that time. There was a being named Toth. Now Toth had done a bioregenesis program that allowed him to pick up part of the 12th strand, because this they were trying to bioregenerate the Anunnaki so they can get their Christos coding back, because if you get your Christos coding back, you start to get your consciousness back in order where you're not acting like maniacs down here. So Thoth had always been part of a bioregenesis program. That bioregenesis program started in 155,000 BC. So he was highly respected. He was an Anunnaki who made it. He was an example to show what they could become, to show it was worth working with them to bioregenerate them. Even though they had egos the size of the universe and were totally race supremacist, they needed some re-education, but they needed template reversal back to a normal Christos pattern. Now, Thoth had reached a level of bioregenesis that was up, it was 11.5 strands, which is not quite the whole 12th strand yet. It's half of the 12th strand. There was an opportunity that was offered by the Anu Elohim matrix up in D11. They had found a way to use that configuration of DNA to block the other half of the strand, so they never got the 12th strand, and then to reverse it from 11.5 down. So they could actually pull D13 current, which is a benign current from the primal light fields, that it's not polarized. They could actually figure out a way to polarize D13 current through a DNA template by blocking out half of the codes on what would have been the 12th strand. Well, in his bioregenesis program, Thoth was up to strand 11.5, and he was offered an opportunity to serve as one of the leaders of a movement of the United Anunnaki Legions, because they were going to try to pull together all the Anunnaki races. He was under a lot of pressure, and there was a lot of past affiliations, that there was a lot of pressure. It was a decision that didn't come easy to this being. What he had established at strand 11.5, you can be immortal at that point. You cannot fully ascend out of the time matrix and go into prematter yet. You need a full 12th strand or more to do that. But you can fully sustain the body perpetually. But you can't ascend. Okay, so immortal is a step toward ascension, but it's not the end of the line. Thoth is immortal. There's another immortal that's famous in our history, and his name is Enoch. Enoch was also an Anunnaki, but he incarnated, actually he wasn't an Anunnaki to start, he was out of the fallen Anu Elohim matrix. A group of them that wanted to go back into the light, and they created what was called the Yod-He-Vod-He host matrix, which was a way to plug into the Brenau Rishi families, so they had a way to evolve out. They would get their coding back. So Enoch was also like Thoth, except Enoch started out as a being who went back into the light, and then he came down into incarnation through the Sirius A Anunnaki. The Sirius A Anunnaki are different than the Nibiruan Anunnaki. Sirius A Anunnaki are called the bipedal dolphin people. Some people have had experiences with the dolphin people. And I've heard, like in the UFO movement, God, these things are really strange looking. They're like, big, like hunched over, like they look like dolphins on feet. You know what I mean? You know? And I remember when somebody said that to me, they were asking me, "Do you know what this kind of ET is?" And I don't know. No, I don't know. You know, because I didn't have the descriptions of what they looked like at that point. And when they explained to me, these are the bipedal dolphin people. These are Anunnaki, and they're associated with Andromeda and with Sirius A. And they're the real race supremacists. They don't even like the other Anunnaki, because the other Anunnaki, which we call the Anu Anunnaki, they're the ones that got involved with some of the Draconian races, and they crossed with different various Draconians, so they're Anunnaki plus Draconian, so they're like half fallen Anu Elohim, half fallen Seraphim. This is the Thoth Enki families. Any of the Enki, Enlil, Anu, you know, the Sumerian god stuff, those are the half Anunnaki, half Drac ones. Then you have the Sirius A Anunnaki. They're called the Jehovah's. All right? Silence. You know? The word Jehovah came out of the name Giovanni. Giovanni was the name of one of the fallen Anu Elohim matrices. Giovanni split. Some of them went into the Yod-He-Vod-He host matrix, where they wanted to go back into the light. Others of them didn't. They were the creators of the Anunnaki race. They created them right after humans were created to be the avengers of Anu, to go destroy the human race so they could take their place. So there's a long history here and some very interesting names and words. But anyway, we'll get into Giovanni and Jehovah a little bit more this afternoon. For now, we come back to 25,500 BC, the Lucifer Rebellion, and the fact that it was aiming for the 22,326 BC due stellar activation cycle. In 22,340 BC, our good buddy Thoth, who the universe was very proud of and the founders loved dearly because of all he had done to try to help rehabilitate the Anunnaki races, he caved into pressure, and he orchestrated something we call the Great Deception. Because he was so trusted, he was allowed into the colonies of the Iani, the Ascended Masters groups that had come here. They had come here to use Stargate 6 to open it. It's something called the Halls of Amareya Passage. It's in Stargate 6. It runs from Sirius B down into Earth. It's like a passage connected to the main passages. They were going to use it to run enough frequency to override the Nibiru and Diodic crystal grid, where it was coming up in what is now the area of Stonehenge. Thoth was supposed to assist in that process. He was also given Cloister Door Tour Plate 11. Now these plates are discs. They're small discs that store all of the information that has to do with the race history here, the planetary history, but also the race history that went up further into the higher harmonics. He was supposed to translate verbally, not auditory, not in written form, because there was too much corruption to put it in written form on the planet then. He was supposed to take collectives of the Anu Melchizedek races, which were half human, half Anunnaki, and he was supposed to teach them the truth, the law of one. He was supposed to teach them the Maharata realities, the inner Christos. He was supposed to begin to teach them these things. Another little thing about the Cloister Door Tour plates, these are frequency holders and transmitters. They can also transmit frequency that activates something else called a signet shield. There were 12 Cloister Door Tour plates that were created at the same time as 12 signet shields. These look like hubcaps. Okay, they're bigger than the plates. You have the small plate, then you have a signet shield. The signet shields were given to the angelic human races in 2,460 BC, no, 246,000 BC, 246,000 BC. As part of the Emerald Covenant, they're remote activators for the Stargates. Okay, you can't activate the shield without the plate that goes with it. Thoth was entrusted with Plate 11 in order to transmit information to help the Anu Melchizedek races, some of them, the ones that weren't totally corrupt at that point, to go into the light and to start, going into bioregenesis. He made a decision to side with the rest of his families, with the Enki family. We call it Thoth Enki because that is a particular group. Thoth Enki is the Enki Anunnaki family that crossed with the Zephelium Draconians, which are the ones that created the Zetas. So you can be like Thoth Enki Zeta races. All right. Then there's the Marduk lines that cross with the Omicron Draconians, which are the ones that kind of look like dragons. So there's different families of Anunnaki up there. Thoth caved into the pressure of the thought of a united Anunnaki nation, where all these usually warring factions of Anunnaki, bunches of them were agreeing to come back together, and they were going to create a new paradise, and they were going to take good care of this time matrix, so I guess it was okay to take it over. He betrayed the founders, and he betrayed everyone who had trusted him, and he had, for thousands of years, he had worked the Emerald Covenant and done tremendous things for the races, so he was very well loved. But he himself came in to the Iani colonies. The Iani colonies were on what was the remainder of the Lemurian continent. There wasn't much left of the Lemurian continent after it was destroyed in 50,000 BC, but there were some island nations left. The Iani colony was put on the area where the activator site for Stargate 12 was. Not the gate, but the activator site, the Q site, which are even more important than the sites themselves because you can't activate the site unless you activate the activator site first, the Q site. This area is now Kauai, Hawaii. They put the colony there because they needed to activate Gate 12 activator site and connect it to the Halls of Amareya D6 Stargate to run enough frequency through to break the Nibiru and Diodic crystal grid link. And that's what they were trying to do. Thoth came in and handpicked a few Anu Melchizedek priests, got them in because he was trusted, got them into the priest caste that were working with the Templar mechanics. And even though they're Anu Melchizedek, we weren't prejudiced against Anu Melchizedeks. As long as they were working the Emerald Covenant and could be trusted, they were welcome too to help with the planetary grids. he got them in to an 11-year program, or it was like 10 or 11-year program, of progressively working up to the point, as a Melchizedek priest, where they would be able to go to the island, the hidden city on the island, and work the big project, which was to break Nibiruan hold on the grids. And he got a group of priests in, and a Melchizedek priests, and they sabotaged the whole mission. And then Thoth came in himself when it all went to heck. There were raids that came in directly from Nibiru, and Thoth was with one of them that landed in the Iani, on the Iani settlement. He gave them an opportunity, the Iani priests, bless you. They were given the opportunity they needed female breeders on Nibiru to get the codes. So the Iani women were offered an opportunity. If you don't want your husbands tortured and killed and sent over as basically fish bait to the corrupt Atlantean temples, we'll let them go, but you come with us. Thoth offered that deal. This is a good example of how wonderful things and horrible things can live in the same body. A bunch of the Iani women went to try to save their husbands. It was even worse, though, because the great deception came in here. They were told. Now, we were all isolated, and I say we because I was there. That was one of my incarnational places. We came into an experience where all of a sudden there are spaceships coming from everywhere, and they're landing on the island, and they're Nibiruan spaceships. Everybody's scattering, like, oh no, what happened? They had jammed our communication lines to the inner Earth races and to Sirius B, which were our main outposts that we could receive off-planet information. We were told that they had control of the planet itself, that they'd taken the whole thing already. We were told that Alcyone Council, that's the Palladian Council, that works with Sirius B and the rest of them, had surrendered because they had won certain battles. We would have been left to believe that there was nothing left. And they had said, if you don't agree to come with us, we'll not only torture your husbands, we're going to blow up the whole place because we don't need it. We'll get inner Earth, and then we'll destroy all the races on the face of the planet. So if you women of the Iani care about the other life forms on this planet, you'll agree to be our breeders. You'll agree to come to Nibiru with us, because if you don't, we'll do horrible things to this planet. We were under the understanding that, this is really bad. They have control of the whole thing. And without Alcyone Council to hold Gate 5, that meant they had Gate 5, not just Gate 4. That meant that the only hope of fixing anything was to stay alive long enough to try to figure out what to do next. So a bunch of the Iani women, because they thought that that's the way the reality was, the way it had been painted, they went with them to Nibiru to be breeders. But they didn't get to go before they got to be breeders. They had to make sure they were pregnant. There was a selection that was done. Only the best of them were chosen. Boy, did that imprint come through with us now. I think women get their total insecurity about how they look because they were treated like meat. Only the ones that had the right genetic characteristics, the right eye color, the right hair color, the right proportions, were allowed to even be selected. You got to remember, Iani women were guardian women. They also came in as part of what's called a gender twin set. They came in with their twins, something called the Maharic twins, which are their D12 level Christos twins. They're genetically bonded together, Iani twins. Male and female couples. They come in at the same time, and they have strand 1 through 6 polarized and separate, but strands 7 through 12 are bonded. So they're literally one being when you get to D7. They split up the Iani gender twin couples, and they forced the women to become breeders of Anunnaki. They raped them when necessary. If they liked one that didn't want to play the selection thing, go ahead, kill me and my mate, I don't care, we hate you, that kind of thing. You're doing something terrible, we're not going to help you. They would rape them instead, and if they happened to be able to get them to conceive, they would keep them tied up until they delivered. The deception was so horrible, it just sent ripples all the way up through the time matrix, because this person had been trusted. And it's like, he was so good when he was good, but when he went bad, boy did he go bad. Yeah.
Drunvalo trusted Toth too.
Toth is Drunvalo's teacher.
Yeah.
Yep. Check out what he does with Merkaba.
About the Toth's emerald tablet.
Yes, I'm getting to that. This is part of the Great Deception. Now remember, Toth had in his possession Cloister Door Turret Plate 11, which was the activator disk for Shield 11 that could activate the activator site for Stargate 11, which is the one they want, because that's the one they want to close everything down at the D11 level, and they want to run it from a reverse matrix D11. He stole the Cloister Door Turret Plate. And first, to make it easier for the corrupt Atlantean Anu Melchizedek priests in the temples, he wrote the Emerald Tablets. He put a physical written translation, and he gave them the books. And there was a lot more than the Atlantean tablets that are coming, the Emerald Tablets that are coming through now. They're just little pieces. He translated volumes of stuff on Templar mechanics and how it works, so the corrupt Anu Melchizedek priest caste could use it to get final control over the grids. This is what the Emerald Tablet physical translations were for. They were taken off a good source, but that he had promised to never, if he was going to be able to use this plate, he was not supposed to commit it to writing because of the Anu Melchizedeks who were trying to take over the planet. If they got access to some of this stuff, it was very, very dangerous. They could they would know how to reverse the things in the grids. So he did that big boo-boo, and he did the Emerald Tablets to give to the Atlantean priest caste so they could finish their takeover job. The worst thing that he did, however, was the fact of the betrayal he did on the Magi lines there, because this is where we started to get our gene codes really messed up with Anunnaki overlays in them. The Iani women were taken, the ones that could conceive, were taken to Nibiru, and they were given husbands. They were assigned husbands. Toth was also one of them. He chose one of the high-coded Iani women to take as his forced wife. And they were taken to Nibiru, and might not have been so bad if there wasn't the Great Rebellion, because they were taken under the promise that their husbands would not be harmed, and that they would not hurt the planet, they would not wipe it out like they had said if we didn't cooperate. We found out, once the women were there, they found out by certain conduits of information that they could still pick up from, interdimensional communication, that they had hunted the husbands, and they had taken them, they had castrated many of them. They had taken them to the Atlantean temples, and because the husbands were highly coded too, they had used them as living electrical posts that they could run frequency through to access grids until it fried them. Some of them escaped. Not many got out that time. That was almost the decimation of the Grail lines again, where they had to be rebuilt after that. So it's not that I have any personal thing against Toth or anybody that likes Toth. When you start to see the history that has gone down here, you get a lot more wise about who you might be talking to in the New Age movement. Toth has stayed in that association until 1992, when something called the Palladian-Syrian agreements were made, where we finally got some of the Anunnaki to agree to not come in here and do the devastation. That was made before they really knew for sure whether a stellar activation cycle would fully commence. That wouldn't be known until 1998, when the grids got up high enough. If they got up high enough, they could anchor the stellar bridge. They entered these agreements in 1992, Syrian-Palladian agreements. Okay, we'll be nice, we'll enter the Emerald Covenant. Yeah, so you're not going to stop us from talking to people and that kind of stuff, right? We'll help them ascend, right? Yeah. Well, in January 2000, when the grids activated, and we knew we were going into stellar activation, they changed their mind. They decided now's our chance. Now that it's certain that it's going into stellar activation, we can't pass up this chance. Some of them stayed in the Emerald Covenant. Some of them broke it. Toth's group broke it. So he is back over in that agenda. Now this agenda that started in 25,500 BC has progressed. It progressed from that point. It progressed up into the 22,326 BC Iani massacre. And then it progressed up further. There was another outbreak of the whole bunch of them. Oh, well, I didn't finish the stalemate part. What happened in 22,326 BC, why we're still here to talk about it, is they decimated the Iani civilization, but we had managed to do enough with the grids to get the gates to shut down. It went into pole shift again. It wasn't as bad as some of the others, but it went into pole shift again. But it shut down the gates. They need the gates open to finish what they had planned to do. So fortunately, we got to be able to close the gates. If that hadn't happened, they would have come in for the kill then. But it was left as a stalemate till the next stellar activation cycle. That's when it would be finished. This is the next stellar activation cycle. Now, after the gates were forced closed, that created the conditions that led up to, there was a glacial period after that. If you look at historical records, it went from somewhere, I think they placed around 21,000 BC up till about 14,000 BC. That was actually amplified in 20,000 BC when they took what was happening with the grids and made it even worse for another reason that we'll get into in the stuff later this afternoon that had to do with Gate 11 and the quest for Gate 11. But since the stalemate of the Iani massacre in 22,326 BC, you had an interesting condition. You had Guardians hanging on to Shield 11, right? The activator for Gate 11. You had Toth and his group hanging on to CDD Plate 11. We finally stole it back in 1999. This is why they didn't let me release any information on the plates until after November of 1999, because it was still trying to get the last plate back. 11. That was 11. And they needed 11 for the activator for the shield for Site 11, because what the basic thing is that the Anunnaki races want to do is they want to get control of Earth's planetary grids under a reverse D11 code. That means it can run 11 dimensions of frequency, but it will run it on a reverse matrix fire letter sequence, just like Nibiru. Now, the Dracs hate this. The Dracs have 10-code DNA. They can't live on an 11-code planet. They want to get rid of the Anunnaki, and they want to take over from Gate 10. We'll get into where these gates are located, and it's kind of amusing when you start to say, oh, that's why there's still problems over there. Okay? Gate 10 and 11 have been like the primo gates. They want to get rid of Gate 12, and there's two different groups that want to take over, 111, 110. So there's been this whole chain of things happening with the quest for Cloister Door Tour Plate 10 and Shield 10, but that has been secured. Actually, it landed in the activator plate landed in Drac hands somewhere. They haven't given me the whole history on the Drac side yet, because right now the Dracs are the ones to worry about less. It's the Anunnaki that are coming in for the kill big time now, and now they've all joined forces. So the real ones that they've given me the history, because this is where the big deception is happening. Most of the people talking to people in the New Age movement are Anunnaki. You know, that's things like Archangel Michael. This is not an angel. You know, some angels are. There's the Archangel Gabriel matrix. They're okay. They're affiliated. They're Anunnaki. They are Anunnaki, but they're okay. They didn't go over into the negative agenda. They stayed in the Emerald Covenant agenda. So we're not saying that all Anunnaki are bad. They were created for a negative purpose, and they have genetic problems because of it. They were created on a reverse matrix, and they were created to wipe out humans. But that doesn't mean, as individuals, some of them choose to not do that. And there have been. That's why the bioregenesis programs have been there. But right now, in the New Age movement, you have 90% Anunnaki. You don't have too many Dracs in the New Age movement. You have them in the UFO movement. So these two movements, this is the two agendas, okay? You have little crossovers in between, but the major saturations are UFO movement equals Drac, and New Age movement equals Anunnaki. You know? It's like, does anybody equal good guys up here? Yeah. There are good guys working through each of them as well, trying to reach the people and get them disentangled. But all this stuff is a very ancient problem that took place. It's only recent stuff has been happening since 25,500 BC. The big thing that was the problem in 25,500 BC was between that point and 22,326 BC, Nibiru got control of Stargate 4, the solar Stargate. which is when the stellar bridge, or that frequency pillar, the Maharata pillar, comes down and anchors into the planet during a stellar activation cycle. It comes down through a chain of stargates. It comes down through the Lyra gates. It goes from the Aramatena gate, then into the Avion gate at D11, then into the D10 Vega gate, then into the D9 Andromeda gate, D8 Orion gate, D7 Arcturus gate, D6 Sirius B gate, D5 Palladian gate, D4 Solar gate. That's where we got a problem, because they have the ability to block that frequency from coming through and to reverse it. If they leave that gate, they have that solar spiral now that leads into Earth. If they don't release it, it's running right now on reverse fire letter sequences, part of it. Its electrical spiral is running reverse. Its magnetic is still all right. But if that isn't released and those fire letters don't go back in the solar Merkaba, in the Earth's connection to the solar Merkaba, if it doesn't go back into its natural alignment, it will create pole shift as the gates open, as the higher gates open. When there's enough frequency coming in, pushing in from the higher levels, and it just can't process through those fire letters. They know this. And they were supposed to, when they entered the Emerald Covenant again in 1992, the agreement was, you have to, by 2000, hand over control of the solar gate, put it back in, guardian control like it was always supposed to be. You did steal it, remember? And they were supposed to return plate 11. Okay? This was part of the agreements. Well, they made the agreements. What happened from that period way back, there's a bunch of stuff in the middle that we'll get into this afternoon, because I have a chart that shows you this progression of something called the Atlantian conspiracy. It's mind-blowing. And these are just some of the little dates that fit into this. There's a chain of, I think there might be 30 of them on the list, of events that have taken place between now and 25,500 BC. I actually started at 50,000 BC when they went in and wiped out Lemuria. Okay? But it shows you this progression. What is
They wiped out.
Well, in 50,000 BC. That was even before the 25,500 BC. See, this stuff built since Seeding 3 was put here. As soon as we were put here, they started with the infiltration. The fallen angelics started with infiltration. But it really got into trouble from 25,500 BC on, because that's when they grabbed the solar spiral, which means they controlled half of the Giza teleport, because it was a teleport for a long time. Gate 4 opens into Giza. It's also a main access point to access other grid lines. And they have been using the Nibiru Diadic crystal grid location. Now we did manage to get the crystals out. We took the grid down, but we weren't able to get the one out of parallel Earth, because they already reversed the grids over there, and they control parallel Earth at this point. A lot of problems over there. They are using the parallel Earth set of crystals to control the area here that was keyed to them, even though we managed to come in, our guys managed to come in and get rid of them. I think it's 7,000, no, this was 5,900 BC. We pulled the final set of crystals out. We did it several times, but that was the last time that they even bothered putting them in. They can still run the grids from there. So Stonehenge and Giza are being used to anchor this planet to Nibiru. That has to be broken. And it's interesting because the Stonehenge location falls right on a line between 2 points in Earth's shields, Stargate 11 and Q-Site 11, the activator site in the gate. Because what they can do with that there is you have the frequency coming over. When Gate 11 activates, you have the frequency coming over from the Q-Site, the activator site. It'll pass through the Stonehenge grid, reverse its matrix, and activate Gate 11 on a reverse matrix. That's the plan. This is a plan that we have been trying to undo since the time it started. Now, we managed to create a stalemate in 22,326 BC. At that point, we got the gate shut down fast enough. It caused pole shift, but at least they didn't get the whole thing. At least they didn't take over. We wouldn't be here worrying about it now. Everything that has taken place since then, part of the history, part of the stories we know about, has been about this setup, about getting the Nibiru Diadic crystal grid. Now, actually, we're not going to make it dysfunctional. We can use it to our advantage if we can recode it on a frontwards fire letter sequence. It's a D11 grid. Okay, the program in the Nibiru Diadic crystal grid is a D11 program. There's one thing that'll override that, a D12 program. gate 12 and the Maharata current can be used to recalibrate it and flip it back over, where you can actually use it to enhance how the grids hold 12th dimensional frequency. That's the plan. Now the plan has to be done in several steps. We need to first, this is what the Iani were trying to do in 22,326 BC. They're supposed to use the Kauai, Hawaii, what's now Kauai, Hawaii location. That used to be in Lemuria. That was the Lemurian continent once upon a time. Use that location, which is Q site 12. That you activate that first, that'll activate gate 12, which is actually in France, in Montsegur. Okay? Use the Kauai location to activate gate 12 and link the activator site to the Cirrus B gate, D6 gate. Stabilize the frequencies from the D6 level, which overrides the D4 level where the Nibiruans have it, and part of gate 5 is compromised by the part of the Alcyon Council called the Ashtar Command. That is the Nibiruan version of the Alcyon Council. They were once cooperative with us. Both Ashtar Command, Galactic Federation, these guys, at times, they would work the Emerald Covenant, but they are the Anunnaki versions, and they at times work with us and at times work totally in opposition on the Anunnaki agenda. So anyway, we were supposed to use gate 6 to link in the activator site 12, Q site 12, in Kauai. This is what we're going to do. This is why we're going to Kauai. Once that was done, the natural frequencies would run from Q site 12 into Montsegur gate 12. So we have gate 12 activated. Then the plan was to go to Q site 11 to pull the frequencies from gate 12 up to Q site 11. Okay? So this is why we're going to Ireland, because it's in Ireland. This has been the quest. This is why they were hiding a bunch of stuff. See, gate 11, Q site 11, and gate 11 were in Atlantis. They were in Lojas, Atlantis, northeastern Atlantis. Best way to hide something is to put it right under your nose and call it something else. Well, that actually draws attention to it. The best way is to rename it, make people think it's something else. If you're looking for a pen, but you're trained to think that that pen is actually an apple, and you see apple because you're looking at it and this is what you think it is, you're going to look somewhere else for the pen. Most of the Atlantean islands didn't sink in 9,558 BC. Portions of them did, but most of them didn't. The big secret was trying to hide what's going on with gate 11 and Q11. Gate 11 is in what's called the Vale of Pusey area in southern England, which is a place between Stonehenge and Avebury. Avebury, Avebury. Yeah, it's like right in between there. If you drew a line on a map, it's the central point. And it's also where there's a bunch of these white horses carved in chalk from the ancient days. All right, that's where gate 11 is. It's running. There is a line of energy that runs in the planetary shields that runs from that gate 11 through where Stonehenge is and then up into Ireland, where Q site 11 is. So what we were supposed to do is after we got the 12 setup activated, we didn't have to go to France because there's no problem with gate 12. It will run, once you activate Q site 12, it'll run the frequency right down into gate 12. But then we had to go up to Q site 11 and draw the frequency. So we'll be drawing frequency from France, from gate 12 of France up into Ireland at gate 11, or not gate 11, Q11. And then we have to go to England. And we are going to bring that frequency, with this now D12 coded frequency, bring it through we're going to the Vale of Pusey area. We're going to activate the gate 11 site, pulling the frequency through the Stonehenge grid, which will make it run through the Nibiruan diotic crystal grid, and it will recode it because D12 frequency is stronger than D11 frequency. So it will reverse it back to its natural pattern. This is what we have been trying to do since the Iani period in 22,326 BC. That's what we tried to do there. Didn't work, but at least we got them where they didn't take over the whole place. But they've been progressively infiltrating ever since then, because they had half of the, the Giza spiral. Now, another time, there are several other times, this was tried in the Egyptian period, this was tried in Atlantis, but we didn't get it then either, like the period around the flood. What happened after the Lucifer rebellion, 25,500 BC period, and then the 22,326 BC Iani massacre, was in 10,500 BC. Something called the Luciferian conquest began. Okay, this was an extension of the Luciferian rebellion, because there was enough guardian presence on the planet and enough assistance where the Sirius B guys could still come in and infiltrate. They didn't, the Anunnaki weren't able to get full control. They were progressively getting more and more control in Atlantis. Atlantis was becoming a real problem. After the Lucifer rebellion, a bunch of the Atlantean priests, king lines, the Grail king lines,